The closeness between Osborne and me was remarkable, and we continued with collaborating on the mountain path successfully. It was fast becoming a reputed spiritual journal, and it brought in erudite seekers like Douglas Harding, Robert Linson, Joel Goldsmith, Wei Wu Wei, Thomas Merton, and many reputed writers from all over the world to be in touch with Ramanasramam and in contact with Bhagavan's teaching. Osborne's remarkable ability in presenting Bhagavan's teachings of self-inquiry is clearly seen in his brilliant editorials and the numerous articles he wrote under various pseudonyms, such as Sagittarius, Abdullah Kutbuddin, Sebastian Cubans, Bodhicitta. He contributed articles on Christianity, Buddhism, and Islam. In each issue of the journal, when accused of using the mountain path for preaching Christianity and Islam, he explained calmly, "Ganesan, I am a staunch Christian, and I still remain so. For some time I was in love with Islam and went to the mosque along with other Muslims after getting converted to Islam. I have also studied Buddhism and stayed in Buddha viharas and known Buddhism thoroughly. I therefore know the difficulties that Christians, Buddhists, and Muslims have in practicing the teachings of Bhagavan's Atma Vichara. By such articles, I am only building a bridge through which all can reach our beloved Master and gain his guidance on his direct path of self-inquiry." The mountain path was now well established and commanded respect and plaudits from all over the world. The main aim of starting an ashram journal was more than fulfilled, and a steady flow of new visitors, mostly young seekers, came to the ashram. Many projects like the completion of Sri Bhagavan's Samadhi Shrine, the meditation hall, the centenary celebrations, and a number of guest houses became a reality, thanks in no small measure to the good news spread through the pages of the mountain path. In 1968, I was introduced to a new dimension of Osborne's spirituality. I was going to Osborne's house at all times of the day. However, for 1 week, I had to be away. After I returned, when I went to his house, I found him stretched out in bed, reduced to skin and bones, all in just 1 week's time. Then I noticed the change and the transformation in his face, and I was wonderstruck. It glowed with a bright and beautiful aura. My inner voice told me, "Osborne has realized." This was his final realization. He opened his eyes and gave me a warm welcome with a lustrous look and said, "Ganesan, I am saved. The mountain path will go on. Do not worry." I sat next to him, overwhelmed with joy. I held his hand and sat gazing at his radiant face. I spent half an hour with him, then went home and announced to my mother, "Amma, Osborne is realized. Please go and see him. His face shines with light." She went to Osborne's house in the evening and confirmed what I had told her. Although after a few days Osborne's physical condition improved, he spoke to no one. His attention was totally drawn inwards, and he showed signs of interest only when Bhagavan or Arunachala was mentioned. Even the mountain path, his pet child, did not seem to interest him. It was like what St. John of the Cross has said, "There comes a time in the life of a spiritual seeker when activity is taken away from him so that he can wholly go inwards." I started telling all my friends about Osborne's change and urged them to go and see him. Some were skeptical and some were delighted. I took T.P. Ramachandra Iyer and a few others, and they confirmed, saying to me, "Ganesan, thank you. You have proved to me beyond doubt that our Arthur Osborne is realized. It only shows that if one is sincere, Sri Bhagavan's grace will transform one here and now. When I went and told Mrs. Osborne about it, she said, "Oh, he has only had a heat stroke." She did not know that what he had was deep and complete self-realization. Before it happened, Osborne had called me and handed over articles for 9 full issues of The Mountain Path, to last up till July 1970. Perhaps knowing that he was to drop his body in May 1970, he edited all the 9 journals before he had his self-realization. He was a jnani who fully accepted his karma. He had completed his karma and now was established in jnana. I used to be like a delighted child in the proximity of Osborne. My friends used to pull my leg. "Do not carry it too far, this hero worship of Osborne." This did not matter to me because they did not know how I enjoyed his Brahmic state. I remembered what Osborne used to say. At last, life has a meaning and a purpose. It is tremendously exhilarating to realize the truth of oneself. His words had come true in his life, and it was given to me to see that every word uttered by Bhagavan and by every one of these old devotees is absolutely true. Just before he dropped his body, Bhagavan told his attendants, "Santosham," which means thank you. When Osborne was in Bangalore and his end was near, he could not speak at all. As a ritual farewell, Mrs. Osborne went around the prostrate body of her husband. Suddenly, she heard Osborne's voice saying clearly, "Thank you." Osborne's body was brought to Tiruvannamalai and interred in his house. I was there all the time and I was heartbroken. The July 1970 issue of The Mountain Path that I brought out without Osborne, and he would place every issue that was brought out in Bhagavan's shrine, and only then would he himself go through it or give it to me and others. And when I placed that July issue in front of Bhagavan's shrine, I was weeping. That day, Osborne appeared to me in my dream and said to me, "Ganesan, give me my journal." He then took the issue, went through every page, and patted me in appreciation. That was the closeness with which Osborne and I worked together. Osborne lived the Master's teaching and attained the ultimate truth of Atma Sakshatar. His very first words to me when I returned to the ashram in 1960 were, "Ask, but ask only for self-realization, and that will retain you in the Arunachala." Arunachala is not only physical, but also in the heart. Arthur wrote, "It is tremendously exhilarating to learn for the first time the truth of the oneself and the possibility of self-realization. At last, life has a meaning and a purpose. It is not a question of whether there is a God apart from you, but whether there is a you apart from God. We ask, who am I? But is there one? First, we presume that there is an I, and then we ask who or what it is. There just is. Not I, he, it, or anything, but just is. We try to divide up this simple is by pronouns, I, he, you, and by this and that. But is it really divisible? I feel being and use the word I for it. But that does not mean that there is any separateness about it. Because you also feel being and you also use the word I for it, because it is the same being. Why should the quest be necessary? Why should a man not grow into his true natural state like a horse or an oak tree? Why should man alone of all creatures be tempted to misuse his faculties and have to curb his desires in order to grow to his true breadth and stature? This involves the question, what differentiates man from other creatures? Many creatures have many abilities greater than man in one direction or another. What distinguishes man is his self, consciousness, that he is not only a man, but knows that he is a man. He is conscious to being a man. It sometimes happens that a person has an experience of a pure being. He just is and feels the fact of being. Also, he appreciates later that this is pure consciousness. Thoughts can be suspended, but even when they occur, they do not interrupt the flow of consciousness. But he feels sometimes no bliss about it. This occurs to him as a sort of grievance. He feels that something must be wrong, either with the teaching or himself. The explanation is that it is the case of the mind eavesdropping. Who feels no bliss? I. But that I has no business to be there at all. He is a mortal spying on God. Being not only feels bliss, but is bliss. Only the absence of the reporter I is a necessary condition for it. Even a life of disinterest activity is not enough to dissolve the ego sense. It usually needs to be reinforced by a stronger and more forceful campaign. This can be either surrender or inquiry. Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita enjoins surrender. Sage Vasista in the Yoga Vasista enjoys self-inquiry. Sri Bhagavan said when he was asked, there are two ways. Ask yourself, who am I? Or submit and surrender. The mind acts as though it is the ruler or owner of all the faculties. It has to abdicate and surrender them, and itself to the pure being or self, or has to look inward to see what is true self or being.